Okay. Right now?
Right now.
Hi. Well, good evening. Welcome to this session of Prophecy for the Last Hour. We're all a little out of sorts because we've had 3 weeks of snowstorms and closed studio. So back in the studio recording tonight, and I have some information, a teaching, different exhortations, things from my heart that I want to share. But I do want to say that this show, when I do this, I take it home and I record it on a YouTube channel. So a lot of people who don't have time to watch it at this time or even from this area, I do put it on. So I have 2 YouTubes that I have done during this season when the studio's been closed because of the snowstorms. And I would just want to say that if you wanted to check out my channel on YouTube, and there you can go and listen to all past shows. There's quite a body of, I think I have over 70 YouTubes uploaded so far. But in the last 2 weeks, I have done 2 series that I consider really important. This sort of has been a little bit of a breakthrough for me. And I'll just give you the titles and a little blip, whet your appetite, whatever, if you want to go. Just put my name, Liz McGee, into YouTube, into the little bar, the search bar there, and it should come right up. But I did one called, listen to this mouthful, Cosmic Dualism and Quantum Theory. And the next week, I did one that was a part 2 almost of the same material called Dualism and the Theory of Everything. So I have been working the Word, reading text, trying to put together, have a lot of questions before the Lord. Usually, and it's true, the more you dig, the more questions you have. God is past finding out. But when I really began to understand the world in a layman's level, I mean totally, probably 9th grade level of understanding this, quantum theory, quantum mechanics, what they were saying, what they were discovering, and using their own words, it really, in my mind, confirmed what all the biblical texts have been saying all along, and especially a lot of the texts we find in the Dead Sea Scrolls of dualism, that there really are, and there really can be, and the more this science comes out, we can be in 2 places at the same time. Dualism, a world of matter and a world of forces, this really could be the reality, and this is what the biblical text has all said all along, and I always had a hard time with that because, like, how can that be God? But, you know, don't put anything past our Abba Father, our Creator God. The other one, Dualism and the Theory of Everything, because this explains to me, the last piece of the puzzle for me, why, you know, for it's man appointed once to die and then the judgment. Throws out all concepts of reincarnation. It really expresses that there is something going on very fundamental that needs answering, and dualism does answer that. So I just wanted to say all that. The last thing, or my jumping off verse for tonight, what I do want to express, there is, I was in a conversation with someone, and this comes up a lot. Whenever now I understand in the body of Christ, we all have different calls. We all have different gifts and callings and assignments from the Lord. And that's what he said. We're a body. We're a very complex group of individuals around the world put together to help usher in the kingdom of God and to preach the good news. And none of us have the exact same wiring or the exact same assignment. But at the same time, we all need each other. And you can't, kind of push out of the equation certain gifts because you don't understand them, you don't like them, they're messy, or for whatever reason. Or it's out of your tradition, it's out of your box, whatever. So I pretty much know what I'm called to do right now, and I really feel like I'm in the zone. Studying deep into the Word of God, trying to really grapple and understand the mysteries that are there. Paul says in Corinthians that even though I understand all prophecies and can understand all mysteries and have not love, it doesn't profit. And I have said that. So there is a place, there is a mystery. And God is not going to hold out a carrot without it does, if you ask me for bread, I'm not going to give you a stone. When you seek him with all your heart, I have really felt that the Lord has asked me to study deeply, to go deep, to go places that most people won't go. I read texts that most people, but I have a grace to do this. I really believe this. All that being said, most people, when you talk about the end times, there's two kinds of Christians. Ones that are just can't wait, like just beam me up now, and those that just don't want to hear it. It's like you're talking to a wall. There's very little in between. Now, I happen to think, and they'll throw out a lot of verses, the people that don't want to hear, even the people, that's what I was going to say, even the people who know it's really not their call to really study all the end time understanding, which is the study of the last days. They're willing to listen. They're willing to do a certain amount of research themselves. They're willing to let the Spirit teach them, and they're willing to admit, yeah, something's going on. And that's all well and good. I expect those who are called to feed the poor, and I will do my part. Absolutely. Or those who are called to pastor people. I'll do my part. But that's not my primary function right now. But then there's another kind of Christian who it's just talk to the hand. Won't go there, don't want anything to do with it, don't almost want to even deny that that's really part of the true Christian biblical experience. To meditate deeply on the last days. When our Bible, over 90% of it, are prophetic scenarios or verses that have deep prophetic significance to them. All that being said, there's two people that will say, oh, well, you don't know the day or the hour. Or they will say, I would say, well, it says even the elect will be deceived. Don't you want to know a little bit about what's going on? And, oh, no, that could never happen. Well, I decided to work, because I always work words and verses very deeply. I'm not saying that Bible translators are bad people. I'm just saying that because we've had layer upon layer upon layer of theological insertions into translations, you really need to go right back to the beginning. Study the words in their Greek or Hebrew, really try to get the essence, the original, the purest, freshest, cleanest understanding you can get before you start layering it with all sorts of theological doctrines and dogmas. Let's just go to Matthew 24, because this is interesting. Because, see, I ran into stuff that I had no idea. I was like, oh my gosh, God, I didn't know. I had no idea how precise. See, language is a gift. Language is how many times God communicates with us through his word. We do have an oral and a written word, and it is so loaded with nuances and precise. When he spoke, and the whole cosmos things started doing what they were supposed to do. And we have this, and I've said this before, simplicity breeds complexity, this unbelievably complex creation, universe, in the subatomic level, the world of matter, what we can see, and what's out there in the stars and the heavens. And then there's the whole multiverse of the quantum theory. There's probably whole dimensions that we just aren't wired normally to perceive. Now, it says in Matthew here that, for there will be great distress. Matthew 24 and Luke 21 are just, whole chapters loaded to eschatological references. So I'm just picking up right in the middle of this chapter, and it says, for there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. At that time, we're talking about the wrap-up, the end of the age. At that time, if anyone says to you, look, here is Christ, there he is, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and miracles to deceive even the elect, if that were possible. See, I have told you ahead of time. So most Christians and I, before I really delved into it today, would give it the benefit of the doubt that the elect can't really be deceived. But that's really, I hate to tell you the bad news, that's really not what is insinuated in the biblical text. The elect can be deceived. And it's my opinion, I have said this before, I think most Christians are totally deceived. I was completely deceived and had no idea of the depth, the strategies, the flat-out, concerted organized, infiltrated, multi-hierarchical, multi-level infiltration of the Luciferians to bring about their agenda for the last days. I'm still astounded. But if you keep your head in the sand, you will be deceived, because it's a done deal as far as I'm concerned. Most Christians today live in a time where it's any time. You know, this is one of the, when you study all the verses, there is a sense like a woman giving birth. I mean, everybody knows she's pregnant. Most Christians know these are the last days. There's enough signs, there's enough stuff going on. But at what is the trigger point? What is the point where that baby starts coming out the birth canal? There's some kind of, you know, something that goes on in a normal pregnancy, you know, that okay, it's time, 9 months, the baby's formed, whatever, this thing is coming forward. That's the beginning of the end game. And that's what Jesus said when they asked him, what will be the sign of the end of the age? What's the one thing? And he said, well, when you see the abomination that causes desolation, as spoken of by the prophet Daniel, run for the hills. Or in another, and I think it's in Luke, it says, or when you see the armies, we're referring to the same event, because there's two sides of that coin. You can't really have an antichrist without his whole political and militarily, you know, strength and all that, doing what he's going to do. When you see the armies surrounding Jerusalem. Okay, so that being said, but let's look at it. This is really all hinges on the interpretation of this word if. And it says, if the elect, to deceive even the elect, if that were possible. So let's break that out and let's look at that. The word if, the word in many translations mostly if possible, is Strong's 1487. Now, this is, and I'm going to contrast this with another word that has the word if. Okay, it's the Greek word ei. Okay, in this verse and in this usage of Strong's, ei is Strong's 1487. Now, it is a conjunction word. It is they're called and I'm going to give you a lot of terms here, whatever. This is going to be a little English lesson. It is a conditional conjunction. It is followed, it expresses a condition, okay, thought of as real, or to denote assumptions that are viewed as factual for the sake of argument. Accordingly, 1487 should not be translated since, but rather always if, because the assumption may only be portrayed as valid. So let's unpack that. So in other words, if the elect, the assumption is they can be deceived. So it's not saying it's saying the complete opposite of what we think it's saying. It's saying yes, they can be deceived, because that is a very valid, that is the assumption, and that fits with all scriptures. That even if you go up to in the same chapter of 24, or we'll even just go over to in the parable. Okay, now he just said it very clearly, if possible, yes, it is possible for the elect to be deceived. Okay, in the parable of the 10 virgins, the whole point is you have 10 virgins waiting, and 5 go into the wedding feast. 5 do not. And it's because 5 have oil and 5 do not have oil. Now, it's highly parabolic. You have to understand, what is the oil representing? What's the feast? What's the bride? What are they waiting for? What's going on here? But later, when the virgins come back after they thought they, and got the oil, and they say, open the door, and he replies, the bridegroom, which we'll assume is Jesus. This is many people take this sort of as a quote unquote rapture ready scenario, or a resurrection. Something's happened now. The bridegroom has come. It's done deal. The doors are locked. There's something going on inside, and there's some people that want to get in outside and can't get in. And he says, he replied, I tell you the truth, I don't know you. Therefore, keep watch. This is all we're told over and over, that we are to keep watch. Now, when it says here that no one, then you flip that with the other little tag verse, people say, oh, well, nobody knows the day or the hour. Well, if you were a good Torah student, you would understand that Jesus was a rabbi. He was he had a yeshiva. This was a bit then. He had 12 disciples. This is how they did stuff. He was teaching. He was disseminating information. He was teaching a core group his Torah understandings. And when he would say to them or to a larger crowd of Hebraic people, these are people Jewish people who understand, even if it's just in a tradition way, their Torah, their storyline, their feast, what everything represents. The day or the hour refers to the feast of Rosh Hashanah, which is one of the fall feasts. This is why when it says that this is the only feast that you don't know exactly the day or the hour. So in other words, him saying, well, I'm going to come at Rosh Hashanah, you just don't know which one. He could have said, you just don't know which one, what year, okay? But he's using the words day and hour because that's telling them the same thing. They know the only feast you don't know the exact day it starts on is Rosh Hashanah, because it's a hidden feast. It's in a 3-day window. There have to be 2 witnesses that come forth with when the new moon arose. I mean, that's not right. These people totally get this context of what he's saying. We're the ones, the Gentile Christians at the end of the age, who have cut themselves off from the root system and basically make stuff up as they go. That's my opinion. It's probably a little harsh, but whatever. They knew what he was saying. So he's not saying, you'll never know, because in other verses, otherwise it's a contradiction, he'll say you will know the season. Not only will you know the season, you'll know when the fig tree is blooming. There's only 4 seasons in a year, and when things are blooming, it's not the winter. Come on, let's stop playing stupid. This is all the signs of the times are around us. So we have no excuse to play stupid. But the point is, we don't know, and I've been in this game for a long time. I was called, I don't want to give a lot of my personal time, but I was called by the Lord, or when I was saved like 35 years ago, by somebody preaching to me the end times, and the stuff he was telling me, I said, oh my gosh, because I didn't want to go into it. I was called to an end time ministry, and I knew it. And I've had so many dreams. I know it. I've seen the devastation, everything. So to me, I've been waiting 35 years for some of this stuff to unfold. It's in a generation. Enoch, if you reference over here the same chapter 25, it says, but as it was in the days of Noah, so will it be at the coming of the Son of Man. But he says, they are marrying, giving in marriage. People are just living their life, thinking it's going to go on like this forever. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them away in a moment. Noah knew there was coming a flood. He didn't know the day or hour. He was preaching for over 100 years as a preacher of righteousness, people, and he's building this boat and trying to tell people God's going to judge you. This whole ship, this whole world is totally derailed, off, and it's going to get judged. But no, they didn't listen. But the point is, it was a season, it was a generation. No one knew it was coming. He just didn't know exactly what day and what hour. God was saying, okay, get in the boat. I'm going to lock the door. We're going to get this show's on the road. Get the show on the road. It's the same way with us. We have to watch all the parents, be ready. You cannot have one foot in the world. This is what the virgins were doing. You can't have one foot in the world and one foot in your quote-unquote spiritual life. You are either all in or you're not. There's no middle ground. And this is my burden with Christians today. When you try to explain, people, these are the last days. Every indicator is there. And plus, it is a 6,000-year wrap-up. And we are beginning to unpack the Shemitahs and the Jubilees and getting the calendar back. Everything that's saying it is happening. And if you are not 100% in, okay, not loving this world, you will be deceived. Okay, I didn't write the book. I'm just trying to tell you. So the word if, my whole point being, the word that is used here, if, does not mean like a perhaps or maybe. It means, yes, the elect will be deceived, and that is a condition that is thought of as a real assumption, and that assumption is based and portrayed as valid and true. We know that from all the other scriptures with all the warnings saying, what profit if you gain the whole world and lose your soul? If you're called to live during the days when the Lord is coming back, and the wrap-up is, if you're not ready, the door's going to get closed on you. So I didn't write that book. Now let's contrast that. Because see, this gets into when you don't really understand and you look deeply, and I'm saying you have to be Berean people. I'm saying, and I don't mean to toot my own horn, because listen, I was a Christian for 30 years before I really started to be Berean. and prove all things. Get in there. Prove it. Work the word. Be a workman of the word. Not being ashamed, making sure nobody can pull any wool over my eyes. Not being blown about by every wind of doctrine. Having a handle on all the doctrine. So you can say, oh, I know that doctrine, that one entered the church in the 1800s. And I'll tell you exactly by who. And, there's a lot of this stuff we could nail if we would pay a little more attention and we wouldn't be deliberately dumbed down. But and I'm going to end with, I got to hurry up here. I want to contrast this with places where the word if is used and it is conditional. And this is so important because our salvation, like I'm saying, is a little bit conditional. I always call this, there's a whole debate in the church of once saved, always saved. And I say it's the if doctrine to me. If. You wouldn't believe how many times the word if in its conditional sense is used in verses on salvation. So that's why I say it's an if you meet the conditions. So sloppy grace today, oh man, wake up, put a knock upside your head. And if you're into sloppy grace and thinking, oh, it doesn't matter what I do or, whatever, I'm going to be saved because I have an intellectual understanding and believe that Jesus is the Son of God. Yeah, why not? What the heck? But if you don't live from your heart, your cardio, and I went over this in my other two YouTube, what that means, it's not a mental assent. It's from where your volition is, meaning your choices are going to absolutely reflect what your belief system. And there's going to be no, so you're not going to say one thing and do another. When it comes from your heart, because this is if you believe in your heart, okay, that's saying your volition, the root of your personality, where you make your decisions, that is going to tell you and tell the world if you truly have surrendered and if you really are saved. But anyways, let's go to this 1437 in your Strongs. It is another word that is used for if, and it is conditional. I want to read you a couple little things about this. It's very interesting. This if means is a combination of two conjunctive words, EI 1487, which is EI, which is an if that has a valid assumption to it, and 302, which is the word and, which is a particle showing the statement is conditional. So when these two are paired together, that is a conditional pairing, and that does mean that the statement is conditional, based on. And it says it is referring to conditions extending to a condition extending to its spin-off possibilities, i.e. what happens if the condition is actualized or is valid. So Strong's 1437, EI plus AN, two conjunctives put together, makes reference to time and experience introducing something future. And think of this in terms of salvation. Our salvation, the ultimate manifestation of our salvation is future, okay? Our resurrected body, the being totally out of here and with him in all senses, that's a future event, which makes reference to time. It introduces something future, but is not determined before the event whether it is certainly going to take place. Now, this word and, 302, Strong's 302, the short definition, it is really an untranslatable word that makes a statement a contingent under the circumstances or in that case, the general effect of which is to make a statement contingent. So if you obey me, right? If you love me, you will obey me. If you believe from your heart, you will inherit eternal life. This is the condition in this if. It is not easily translatable. I mean, I do have a certain amount of empathy for the translators. It always conveys important meaning, and the King James sometimes translates it as perchance or happily. That's where they perchance. Maybe this is true. I don't know. I can't really figure it out. But anyways. 302 is used about 300 times in the New Testament, introducing statements that have conditional or hypothetical meaning. That was not, let's say it again, the if the elect can be deceived. The elect can be deceived, okay? Boom, done. We're moving on. And is a conditional particle expressing possibility based on a pre-existing condition. This adds an important theoretical, hypothetical sense to a statement which narrows down the sense of that statement. Now let's look at some verses where this is, this if is used. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain. This is with Jesus, and this is the temptations in the wilderness. Satan is coming to test Jesus. And he uses the word, if you are the Son of God. That's the other if. And we know he's the Son of God. It was interesting because Satan didn't know. He had to test the guy. He had to find out. He knew there was a Messiah coming, but was this the dude? So that was the if, okay? Because we know he is the Son of God. So but this if, he says, so then the devil took him to a high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to him, all these things I will give you if you fall down and worship me. This is the point. If Jesus met the condition, if he would fall down and worship Satan, then Satan would give him all the kingdoms of the world. And that's the whole, you sell your soul to the devil. If you want, there's always there's nothing free in life. You always have to meet the devil's condition. There's another one, Matthew 5:20. For I say to you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Now that word unless is this word if, a condition. So in other words, what this is saying, let's flip this around into a better translation. It says, if your righteousness does not surpass that of the scribes and the Pharisees, meaning being a religiously observant person is not going to cut it. So if your righteousness does not surpass that of the scribe, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. So there's that conditioned. Okay, I hope you begin to see this. Let's do another one. Matthew 6:15. If you do not forgive others, then your Father will not forgive your transgressions. So conditional. If you don't forgive, he isn't going to forgive you. He is merciful and forgiving. We have to be like our Father. They said, how many times are we supposed to forgive our brother? 70 times 70, some astronomical number, and it kind of represents just all you're just always supposed to forgive him. That's our God. So Romans 10:9, this is very interesting. He says, now this is the famous verse, Romans 10:9, right? If you confess with your mouth Jesus as Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. So if there's conditions, you don't get saved unless you truly do confess with your mouth, meaning before men, make a public statement. I'm a Christian. I believe that Yahushua HaMashiach is the only name under heaven whereby men may be saved. I absolutely believe that. But then this other part, you really have to understand, it's not just a mental assent, and it's not just oh yeah, that sounds like a good one. I'll go with that. I'll do the Jesus card for my salvation. But you have to believe in your heart, and you really have to get a handle on what this word heart means. This, like I said, it's your volition, the center of your will, because that will determine your actions. For out of the heart are the issues of life. That's where sloppy grace isn't going to cut it. Because if you really believe in your heart, you do love him, because that's one of the commandments, then you will obey him. So you will have a life that reflects holiness and purity and getting rid of sin and not being under demonic infiltration. The last one, now this I have to say, because this 2 Thessalonians 2:3, because this could put one whole little issue to bed. In my opinion, it does, but whatever. I've never heard this one taught from this angle, so it says that you will be not quickly shaken. This is a famous, where Paul's talking about the day of the Lord. So he says that you will not be